Death at Devil's Bridge, Chapter 4. He showed me his bill of fare to tempt me to dine with him. "Poh," said I value not your bill of fare, give me your bill of company. Jonathan Swift, Journal to Stella, 1711. Having retired to the library with his friends, Charles Sheridan sat back in his comfortable leather chair, and after dinner brandy at his elbow, and began to tamp his pipe. In his bachelor days he had abhorred dinner parties, but now that he and Kate were married and settled, at least for the time being, at Bishop's Keep, he found that he enjoyed playing the host. He also found that he much preferred the comfortable library with its shelves of well-thumbed books to the coldly opulent magnificence of the library at Somersworth, where his ancestors' gilt-edged volumes just gathered dust. He had never taken any particular pride in his baronial heritage, and had only been grateful that his elder brother Robert had taken the family duties off his hands. But now Robert was dying, and the entire burden, Somersworth, his brother's seat in the House of Lords, the care of his mother, was about to fall to his very reluctant shoulders. He pushed the thought away and glanced tenderly in the direction of Kate's alcove, where a green velvet drape concealed her desk and typewriter. Perhaps it was her lingering presence which imbued the room with such a comforting warmth, or the memory of their many lively conversations and spirited debates. The company of his wife was a fine thing, her intellect keen, her interests vast and diverse, her insights penetrating, if sometimes illogical. But tonight's company of men was excellent as well. Charles was fond of the elderly vicar who dined regularly at Bishop's Keep, and his friend Bradford Marston. And tonight he particularly enjoyed Charlie Rolls, a handsome, fine-featured lad with flashing dark eyes under thin, dark brows, amazingly mature and self-possessed for a 19, if a trifle conceited. While Rolls was at Eton, as Charles himself had been, he had specialized in practical electricity and was presently working toward a degree in mechanical engineering at Trinity College. The young man's greatest passion was not for his studies, however, but for motor cars, and his exuberant schoolboyish report of larks with his French-made Peugeot at 3 3/4 horsepower, the most powerful automobile yet manufactured, had held the rapt attention of the entire dinner company. His listeners had been enthralled by the story of Rolls' breakneck journey from Victoria Station to Cambridge, which he completed in 11 hours and 45 minutes at an average speed well above the legal limit. In fact, Charles thought, listening to the quick, impulsive Rolls, the boy was a daredevil, a rebel bent on challenging human limits by every possible means. He raced his father's yacht, he rode in competition, he had just won his half-blue for cycling, and he was an avid balloonist. If there is a record of any kind on land, sea, or in the air, he had boasted at dinner, I intend to break it. But for the moment Rolls' activities were land-based. He and Bradford were organizing a grand motor car exhibition involving the leading proponents of motoring from all over England, planning of which had occasioned his stay at Marston Manor. Charles had remarked to himself that while Rolls was not gifted with a notable fortune, he obviously had a keen eye for profit and an even keener relish for competition. In combination, these two motives might in the end propel him to great wealth, although that was not likely to happen soon enough to satisfy Lady Marston's requirements of a suitor for her daughter. Charles suspected that Patsy's infatuation with young Rolls would lead nowhere, except, most like, to their mutual unhappiness. The vicar relaxed on the sofa, stretching his feet to the fire. "Well, Charles," he said comfortably, "you seem to be progressing quite well with your modernizing, although not necessarily in the kitchen." Charles grimaced wryly. "I fear I have overestimated the staff. One would think that one's cook, of all people, would be anxious to relieve the kitchen maids of all the coal carrying, but she, and the maids too, are afraid of the new cooker will explode, and I'm not at all sure that Kate doesn't share their apprehension. Tell you what, Vicar, why don't you go down to the kitchen and reassure them as to its safety? They'll trust you." Bradford Marston glanced up at the gas chandelier, which spilled a warm glow over the room. "You've gotten that coal gas plant of yours operating successfully, then?" Marston was a fair-haired, handsome man in his mid-30s, with a blonde moustache and haughty angular features, as impeccably groomed and dressed as any gentleman of high breeding and good birth. But his mouth wore a cynical half-smile, and his restless glance seemed to see into a future that held greater excitement than the tedious present. He suffered from a consuming and expensive passion for motor cars, much to the chagrin of his elderly father, whose only passion was for horses. Indeed, it was well that Lord Christopher Marston was absent on holiday, Charles reflected, for the old man would certainly object to the motor car exhibition that Bradford planned to hold at the Marston estate a fortnight hence. Not only would the motorized vehicles frighten the stud, but the exhibition itself would suggest to his lordship's horse-loving friends that the Marstons had gone over to the enemy's camp. "There's a bit of fine-tuning to be done," Charles said, pulling on his pipe. There was another of the benefits of life at Bishop's Keep. There was leisure for scientific and technical experimentation. "So far we've been operating only one of the three retorts, but I dare say—" "Excellent," Bradford said hastily. He looked at Rolls, who was smoking a Turkish cigarette and sipping a cordial. "In that case, Charlie and I have a favour to beg of you." "Actually, it's a rather large favour," Rolls said. He grinned easily at Charles, his eyes sparkling, and spoke with an almost schoolboy eagerness. Charles raised his eyebrows. "You need coal gas to power a combustion engine at your motorcar exhibition." The thought that coal gas might serve as engine fuel had already occurred to him. Perhaps he might use it to power the single-cylinder stationary engine that now drove an experimental dynamo which he hoped would soon electrify Bishop's Keep. If, that is, he could overcome the servants' concern about what Kate termed his explosive activities. Rolls laughed. "We'll need a great deal more gas than that. We'll be lifting about 1,000 pounds. "Lifting?" Charles asked, surprised. "You want me to fill a balloon, then?" "I told you he's quick," Bradford said to Rolls with satisfaction. "Never misses a clue." "I fear I have missed something, though," the vicar said. "I thought we were to have a motor car exhibition, and now we are to have a balloon?" "The idea is to attract the public's attention," Rolls explained. "We thought it would be jolly to have a balloon chase, hare and hounds, do you see? The balloon sails off across the country and the motor cars pursue it. The first to reach the balloon's landing spot wins." "Are you sure any will reach it?" Charles asked. "The lanes in this part of the country are atrocious, and the vehicles themselves are not dependable enough to—" "But that doesn't matter, don't you see?" Rolls exclaimed. "It will be a glorious race however it goes, and it will attract enormous amount of attention," he added happily. "Already has," Bradford muttered. Charles went to the shelf and took down a thick chemical reference work. He opened it to a table of gas properties, then pulled out his ivory slide rule. After a moment calculating, he said, "It appears that you'll need between 20 and 30,000 cubic feet of gas." Rolls frowned. "That's vastly more than we anticipated. Can you do it?" "We don't normally produce anything like that amount here," Charles replied, "and my storage reservoir is quite small. But if we put the two other retorts into service, I dare say we can produce it in a day or two. And if the weather remains reasonably calm, the gas can be discharged directly into the balloon." He looked from Bradford to Rolls. "I assume you have already procured one." At Bradford's nod, the vicar leaned forward eagerly. "Ballooning has long been a dream of mine. I knew a man who lived in Paris during the Prussian siege of '70. He was one of the aeronauts, fortunate men, who carried mail and emissaries out of the city." His pale blue eyes shone. "I'll leap up to my God, who pulls me down, as Faust says. What a glorious excitement! I should like to have escaped Paris by balloon." "Or flown over the Alps," Rolls returned warmly. "Like that Frenchman, Francisque Aubin, in '46. He ascended on the French side during a storm that lifted him to a height of 15,000 feet and carried him over the mountains and set down near Turin." His face was eager. "A great adventure. But myself, I should like to fly heavier than aircraft. Like that German chap, Lilienthal, who was just killed in some sort of glider," Bradford asked. "Or like the American Langley," Charles said, who is testing mechanically propelled flying machines. "I should prefer balloons," the vicar said. "Just think of achieving Glacier and Coxwell's altitude record. He was transfixed. 29,000 feet! What an achievement, to soar like the archangel, to see the world as God sees it. He began to hum the refrain of "Nearer, my God, to thee," then broke off. "But I don't suppose I shall have that opportunity," he said in a more practical tone. Rolls grinned. "You certainly shall if you wish, sir." The vicar's eyes widened. "Oh, my goodness," he breathed incredulously, and lapsed into contemplation of his good fortune. "So the gondola is large enough to carry a passenger," Charles remarked. "Indeed, and the balloon itself is large enough to support several, depending on the degree of inclination," Rolls replied. He gave Charles a speculative look. "Marston tells me that you are a photographer." Charles smiled. "I suppose you would like me to ascend in your balloon with my camera." "Exactly so," Rolls said. "Yours will be the very first photographs of motor cars taken from the air, and you will photograph the winner as well. Can you imagine the newspaper reportage?" His hand sketched a banner headline. "Motor cars raise balloon across Essex. The idea was Harry Dunstable. He's quite excited about it." "Harry Dunstable," Charles exclaimed. "That's right," Rolls said. "And it's a stroke of genius in my opinion. People will come from miles around, while we may even be favoured by a visit from one of the royals." "And what do you think, Bradford?" Charles asked. But Bradford nervously changed the subject. An hour later, as the company was about to make its departure, Charles discovered why. His friend pulled him aside and said in a lower voice, "I say, old chap, I'm afraid I must ask another favour. This exhibition, you see." He smoothed his moustache nervously. Charles waited, hoping that Bradford was not about to ask him for another loan. The last was being partially repaid in the services of Bradford's manservant, who was married to Kate's housekeeper and had a natural talent for tinkering with machinery. It was not a bad method of repayment, as it turned out, but Bradford's airy attitude toward his obligations disturbed Charles and made him wish that his friend had a stronger sense of fiscal responsibility. "It's father," Bradford burst out at last. "I received a telegram from him today from France. Roger Thornton, blast the bloody beggar, wrote him that I planned to make Marston Manor the site of a motorcar exhibition, and he is in a raving paddywhack. He instructs me to cancel." Bradford frowned petulantly, like a schoolboy reprimanded for being out of bounds. "He has forbidden me to hold the exhibition at Marston," he said in a low voice. "I haven't yet told Rolls, hoping that I might be able to make another accommodation and thus spare him and the other organizers any anxiety. So you're looking for a new site?" "I fear so," Bradford said. "It's not that I'm afraid of the pater, but—" He looked uneasy, as well he might, Charles thought, for Lord Christopher had more than once threatened to reduce Bradford's allowance. "I don't suppose— that is, I shouldn't like to ask. Oh, dash it all, Sheridan, would you consent to holding the damn thing here at Bishop's Keep?" Charles frowned. The request was scarcely easier to answer than a request for another loan. Bradford spoke hastily, as though he feared Charles was about to refuse. "This exhibition will not be as large as that at Tunbridge Wells last spring. Only 4 motor cars are entered in the chase and half a dozen others in the exhibit, and I can't think there will be any real unpleasantness." His smile was thin. "This one favour, please, Charles. I shall not forget it." "Unpleasantness?" Charles asked. Bradford gave him a quick glance. "Oh, you know," he said, shrugging lightly. "Motor car enthusiasts are an opinionated lot. Tempers run high from time to time." "Well, if Dunstable is involved, I can see why," Charles said grimly. "Most thinking people consider him a charlatan. He clearly has no plans to exploit those Daimler patents of his, and yet he's enticing investors with wild promises." He broke off at the stubborn look at Bradford's face. It would do no good to chide his friend from falling in with the promoter's schemes. He had plenty of company. "Well, with Dunstable here, things should be interesting," he said, "and I am intrigued by the challenge of filling the balloon and flying in it." "Then you'll do it." Charles considered. The exhibition was scheduled for the same week Henry Royce was coming from Manchester to have a look at the dynamo. Royce, an able inventor, would certainly be interested in the motor cars. It was also the weekend the village annual harvest feed, which for 15 years had been celebrated in the park at Bishop's Keep. The villagers would enjoy the added excitement of motor cars and the balloon. "If Kate agrees," Charles replied. Bradford let out a long breath. "Thanks, old man. You don't know how grateful I am." "I believe I can guess," Charles replied dryly.